Good morning, Durango. I'm Zach Hively. This is the Four Corners Arts Forum. I am here this morning on the phone with Dennis Elkins, the writer, performer, director of the upcoming performance Box at the Durango Arts Center. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Zach. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us all the way from New York City this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having me on the air.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, I mean, New York City sounds like a long way away, but Durango used to be home for you. So this is kind of a homecoming of sorts, isn't it?
Absolutely. I moved away just almost 2 years ago. 2 years ago this summer. So this is a homecoming. It really is. I'm very excited about it.
I'm excited that this show gets to come here too. So let's just jump in and tell people a bit about Box. You spell it lowercase b with a period at the end. I'm not sure if there's specifics in that you want to go into, but tell us a bit about the show. What is it? What's the pitch for the show?
Okay, so let me first start by saying the period is very important. So it's Box period. That's how we say. That's how it's officially titled.
Oh, okay.
So we tend to just call it Box, but the official title it's very fancy, just Box period. But anyway, Box period started out as an experiment on my part about 6 years ago, when the ashes of my son came to the door in a cardboard box. And I was absolutely struck dumb with I thought they came in urns or something fancy, something fancier than just a cardboard box.
Yeah.
And then I had to pack up all of his things in his room again into other cardboard boxes. And this idea struck me that, oh my God, is this the end of our lives, just packed away in a box?
Yeah.
So my colleague and actual director, Carla Knutson, who lives and works out of Savannah, Georgia, a former colleague of mine when we taught at Savannah College of Art and Design, I went to her and I said, I have an idea for this show and I don't know how to start. And so we spent a few months sort of getting it on its feet, and I got about halfway done, and then I performed it as a work in progress for a group of folks up in Vancouver, even before I got to Durango, back in 2012. And so I guess that's about right. And then after I left Fort Lewis, I still hadn't finished it. So the first thing on my agenda and my friend Carla's was, we have to finish this project. So I went back to Savannah and I worked on it with her for another month, and then we put it up. So that's kind of the history of it. And I know I'm talking a lot, but
no, please.
It really is a story, a collection of stories of my life and how the cardboard box has become so important to our lives. We pack things away in it and we store them away under the bed, or we put them in the closet or in the attic. And yet when we decide to move, which I've done several times, we still just sort of take the box with us, and we can't seem to get rid of it. So that's the stories that I'm trying to unpack, you might say, are why do we get so fascinated with packing away things and then holding on to them, and how do we let them go?
Yes, and I see that this leaves a lot of room for literal physical packing in boxes, as well as plenty of metaphorical, emotional, spiritual packing.
So many references. We could just keep going all day. But and when Carla, my director, and I started working on this, I kept envisioning just having this mountain of boxes behind me. And she said, "Oh, no, 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 no. You get one box,
Mm.
and you've got to make everything work with one box." And so it's Dennis and one box performing this show.
Awesome. Any particular box? I'm curious now.
Well, embarrassingly, it's got to be big enough that I can fit in. So there was a sequence of auditioning boxes, you might say, sort of finding the right box with the right size that I could fit in and get out of easily. It has to be square. I was in the middle of a performance in South Africa, and I could not find any square boxes there. And so I was using sort of a rectangular box, only to find out that when you have a rectangular box, it doesn't fold easily. And I'm in the middle of a show when I realize, oh, this doesn't fold now like it's supposed to. I had to kind of knee it to make it bend where I needed to go with it. So, there is the extra heavy-duty box. Doesn't work either because it cuts up my fingers. It's really funny that I had to go through several different kinds of boxes to find the one that actually worked.
Goodness. Now I think, people ought to go check out this show now, if only to find out what kind of box you're using. And
I know. I can tell you so many things about boxes.
Probably more than you ever thought you would when you started.
Ever in my life.
Man,
yes.
We learn the darndest things when we jump into a creative project, don't we?
It's uncanny, let me tell you.
Goodness. So I'm curious about the tone of box. I mean, the story starts, the story you just told starts with the death of your son, and yet here we are laughing about various types of boxes. And so the tone of this performance could be a whole range of things. So what do people expect, or what do you hope to give to people when it comes to tonally?
I guess the tone of the piece goes from, for me, absolute devastation, the worst possible moment in my life, and then there is something dark and humorous about all the things that we keep and why we keep them. And so it goes from, when I talk about things that we keep, I talk a lot about the things that I had to pack up out of my parents' house when they passed. And I couldn't believe how many Hummel figures my mother collected, or pictures of windmills. And it just becomes almost to the absurd as to, and how funny it all is when you start seeing hundreds of photographs of family, and they're not even your family.
Yeah.
But it's family that meant something to my mother. Friends, So there's something that's really humorous in this and very poignant, and there are moments of heartbreak that I have to get through.
Yeah.
But I think that's important for us to understand that this is a piece for a lot of people. And I have to tell you that that's part of the reason why I was asked to come and do the show in Durango. The representatives of the Durango Friends of the Arts, as well as the Grief Center of Southwest Colorado, came and saw my work when I performed it in Pagosa Springs last fall. And immediately they came to me, both separately, and said, would you please consider coming to do a benefit for us in Durango? Because it spoke to them both artistically and for this need to share with individuals who have experienced loss at various levels. So it both spoke to them in a way that we want you to share this with others. So that's what I'm doing.
Nice. Let's talk a bit about that, because this is a benefit show for both the Durango Friends of the Arts and the Grief Center of Southwest Colorado. So what has that partnership been like to you, and what does it mean to you?
Well, these are individuals. Karen Little and Judy Austin both came to me. They were the ones who saw the show in Durango and Pagosa Springs, and then they asked me to come to Durango. And I said, you two need to get together, because I think this would be a nice opportunity. Trying to do fundraisers is always such a big ordeal. It really can be. But the more people involved, the easier it is. Jobs can be farmed out. And so they have worked so well within their organizations and together to make this happen. And for me, I know I only spent like 5 years of my life living and working in Durango, but 5 years is still a significant amount of time that you grow to love a community. And this opportunity was like, hey, this really is kind of a nice idea for me to just do something personally for friends, to say thank you for being so supportive while I was there. And I feel very strongly about the work that both of these organizations do for Durango and all of Southwest Colorado, Southwest Colorado. So that's why I'm doing it. I think it's a very important cause, worthwhile, and I want to contribute in this way.
Awesome. And there's a talk back after both of the performances as well, right?
Yeah. It was not necessarily designed in that way, but I have found, as I've performed it in different locations, that people have actually wanted to participate, not by just watching and experiencing it voyeuristically, in a sense, but actually when the show is done, so many people want to express their own experiences of what the points I touch on in my life. And this is something that happened even the first time I did it back in Vancouver, when people started asking me about all of these questions that related to times in their personal lives. And I thought, oh, this is going deeper than I thought it was going to. This is speaking to more people on more levels than I ever dreamed.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those things to open up to a talk back if people want to share. If not, the bar is still open. So, we don't have to talk about it. But if we do, some people really need that opportunity to share.
Yeah, I think, grief can be one of those experiences that feels so personal. And so to encounter someone else who's dealing with the same ideas and grappling with the same process has got to be an opening experience for a lot of people.
It was not anything I was expecting, not at all. But I've had individuals more than once come up to me following a performance and say, thank you. You put all of my feelings into words that I couldn't. That they just they didn't know how to express them.
Yeah.
And so they had to give me a hug, with tears in their eyes and laughing at the same time, saying, thank you. I lived through this too.
So you've obviously been involved in many performances, and I have to think that after, you put on a Shakespeare play, people aren't coming up to you and saying, oh my God, that play just spoke to what I've been through. At least not at the same rate that it sounds like you're getting after Bach's period.
Not often. no, not really. I think that's what surprised me, is that these people were coming up to me unsolicited and had to respond, had to tell me of their own times. So, yeah, it's not your typical, at the end of the conclusion of a show. It's not. It doesn't usually happen that way. So this is really a cool experience. It's humbling. Let me put it that way. It's a humbling experience on my part that somehow something I can say or do affects someone else in such a way that they have to respond.
That sounds special.
Physically, verbally.
That sounds really special. And if you're just joining us here on the Four Corners Arts Forum, I'm talking with Dennis Elkins about his upcoming performances of Bach's Period this weekend at the Durango Arts Center. Dennis, let's real quick give people heads up about when the shows are and where they can get tickets.
We have two shows on Saturday, this coming Saturday, June 1st. It's only the one day at the Durango Arts Center. The matinee starts at 2 o'clock, and the evening performance starts at 7:30. And if you want to get tickets ahead of time, which I would recommend, you can go through the Durango Arts Center website, and they are actually being the ticket agent for this show.
Perfect. And 100% of proceeds are being split between the two nonprofits, the Friends of the Arts and the Greek Center of Southwest Colorado, right?
Yes. Now the ticket prices have been set by the organizations because this is a fundraiser for them, and 100% of all ticket sales goes to these organizations, the Greek Center of Southwest Colorado and the Durango Friends of the Arts.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis.
So it's pretty important.
It's very, very important. There's a few directions I'd love to take this, so let's just pick one. We'll just jump right into this one. The whole process you described earlier of writing Bach's Period, of developing it, of actually performing it, sounds to me like a very like you're exposing your vulnerability very, very profoundly, actually. I mean, you're bringing your very personal grief to the fore of this public performance. What is that experience like for you?
I was asked not too long ago about, it was following a performance, and the question was asked is, how can you live that moment over and over and over with every time you do the show? And I think, honestly, there is not a day that goes by that I don't think of my son in some way.
Of course.
And of course, he died in 2008. So I am now at, year 11. And even though the heartache and the loss is still very real, you learn how, okay, I can keep going. If I don't keep going, I don't know what the result might be.
Yeah.
I have to create the world on stage as I would any kind of an acting performance. It's a job. Yeah. So the actor has to divorce themselves from that personal moment that takes them over the edge. And so you have to keep control over the situation, as to, you can't let it get you to a point where you can't control, or you're out of control. Does that make sense?
I think that makes great sense. And it actually sounds like the inverse of what a lot of actors will talk about, which is, typically they're on stage performing a fictional character or a character that's not them. And so they tap into their own experiences to find the emotion that the character's feeling. And it almost sounds like the inverse of that for you. You're having to divorce yourself from your own emotion.
Right. You do. And I think that is part of the rehearsal process, part of the writing of it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I took myself to the brink a lot while I was putting it together so that I don't have to go beyond the brink when I'm performing it.
Yeah.
Now, that is not to say that after a weekend of performing Bach's period, that somehow at some point, a few days down the road, I don't have to have a moment to myself and let myself go there. But I can't let myself go to the extreme in front of an audience.
Yeah.
My job as an actor is to make them go to that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
And it sounds like you do a pretty fine job of that just based on how people respond to you afterwards.
That's what I'm hoping.
Well, and I think obviously, a lot of people use their creative processes to heal and to keep going, and whether from grief or from anything else that happens to us in life. And I want to bring this back to the idea of the box. And I think a lot of artists who come on the show talk about how limitations enhance their creativity, actually. And I thought of that when you talked about your director saying, no, you only get one box on stage.
You only get one box.
Yeah. So, and just the limitation of you doing a one-man show and a one-box show, how do you think that limitation or those limitations shaped your development of the piece?
Well, to give you a try to be brief story. So Carla gave me the box and she said, just play with it. And this box, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was just standing there. I tossed it around. And then I remembered that as a child, I loved playing with boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd crawl in them and I'd decorate them, or I'd pretend they were a car or something. So the first thing I did was I crawled into the box and ran around the room making car noises. And Carla, she loved it. So that is now part of the opening sequence to my show.
Nice.
I mean, it's taking and forcing yourself into that anything's possible mode.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can pull your ego out of it,
yes,
then there's all sorts of surprises you can find.
Goodness, yes.
And that's precisely what I did or have done.
Awesome.
And I still do. Actually, it continues to grow and morph a little bit.
Okay. So do you mean like within the performances, things occur to you and it continues to evolve in that way, or what did you mean by
There are moments when all of a sudden, even though I wrote it, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of a piece and I'm delivering it like I normally do, and something happens, and all of a sudden Dennis wakes up to, oh, wait a minute, if I say it this way, it's even clearer than before. So I'm still in the moment of seeing what's happening as I'm doing it, and some things change and shift, and words change. Some lines get shifted or cut.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a continually living organism because it changes. It changes almost with every performance a little bit.
Nice. Well, and I think we sometimes forget that this is in fact called a play, and that's exactly what it sounds like you're doing up there, is playing.
Precisely. And of course, because it does touch us, the audience, in a very real, personal way sometimes. I get people who talk back to me from the audience, and I can't ignore that. So, or a cell phone goes off, or someone's knocking at the door, and we have to adapt to that moment in part of that play, or you're kind of plastic.
Yeah, and I got to think it's different to adapt in those ways with a one-man show versus with a full cast.
Oh, it's because of the nature of this it's very much storytelling, and depending on the reactions of the audience, I don't go off on a riff of some new material, but if there's an opportunity to comment on something, you can guarantee I do it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too to take the boxes in a different direction, as you were describing that sort of awakening to, wow, our lives can be reduced to boxes, and what are we doing with all this, and going through your parents' boxes. You know, I think culturally right now we're in this phase where the idea of tidying is very big. You know, there's Swedish death cleaning and Marie Kondo and all that. And
right.
And I imagine I'm not the first one to bring this connection up to you. How do you think your piece is conversing with the wider dialogue going on right now about our stuff?
It's interesting. I've had several people talk about this Kondo's work, about how similar we're approaching often the same thing. And I don't know whether it's generational, cultural, where my parents had a home that they lived in for over 20 years. I mean, that was that one home. They had been married for 44 years, so they had acquired a lot of things and had never moved except once.
Yeah.
So, and in my life, where I have moved more times than I can count, and it's just simply what can I do without? I cannot have all those things that my mother did.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea what to do with all the things that she did have. So that's what do I do with all of those things? That's still very much a part of my reality.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. So
even now,
has the process of working with Box Period then altered your own approach to the things in your life?
Very much so. I'm a person who really loves to travel, and it used to be when I would go places, I would feel compelled to have to buy something, a souvenir of a place.
Mm-hmm.
And anymore these days, it's like, this souvenir has got to be practical, or it doesn't go in my suitcase.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm learning a lot, even now.
Awesome. Well, with the last couple minutes we have, Dennis, I'd love to give people one more chance to find out where to find out more about Box Period, showtimes, tickets, information about the performance, anything like that.
The performances will be this coming Saturday at the Durango Arts Center at 2:00 and another one at 7:30. Tickets can be found or purchased by going through the Durango Arts Center website. There is also my website, but you don't need that because it doesn't get you to the tickets, does it? So you need to go to the Durango Arts Center website.
Cool. Well, go ahead and give us your website in case people are curious to find out more about you and your work.
Well, it's really kind of easy because it's Box Period Productions.
Okay.
You can type that into your computer and it will come up, and you can see other photos and what folks have said about it here and there and everywhere. So that's pretty easy to know too. Box Period Production.
Cool. And is that the punctuation period or the word period?
It's the word period this time. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, with all the dots in web addresses, just
I
wanted
know.
to make sure.
That's right.
Cool. So spelled out Box Period Productions. Dennis Elkins, one-man show, Box Period, will be at the Durango Arts Center this Saturday for 2 shows. Information is available online and at the Durango Arts Center. Dennis, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today. It's been great to have you here.
Hey, Zach. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm Zach Hively. This is the Four Corners Arts Forum, and we will catch you all next week.